When I was 25, there were two key parts to my identity. The first was that I was a man. I know it didn't sound right to me either. I had short hair, I did physical labor for a living, and I did not make it a habit of showing up in public wearing a custom-tailored, silk-embroidered, fit-and-flare three-quarter sleeve boat neck dress. Because I was a man. That was my story, and I was sticking to it. I did have a plan for how I would tell my friends and family. They would be gathered in my home. I would provide a beautifully composed handwritten letter they would each take turns reading, while I lay comfortably in my grave, having died of natural causes at an old age. I firmly believed that if anyone ever saw me, they would not want me in their life. Second key part of my identity was that I was a pretentious theater artist. Redundant, I know, but I was the snobbiest of the snobby. I told a theater producer once I wouldn't work on his Rodgers and Hammerstein musical because it was too commercial and too conventional. I said that out loud to a person. So I'm living in San Francisco at the time, and one day I'm walking down Market Street, and I see about 50 yards down the sidewalk two young people. And I see them seeing me. They're looking at me, and they're saying something to each other, and they're coming right towards me, and I don't know what's going on. They run right up to me, and they say, "Excuse me, are you Brendan Fraser?" Now, before anyone thinks I'm humble bragging about being mistaken for Brendan Fraser, bear in mind he was not yet the whale of an actor he is today. At the time, he was famous for things like Encino Man and George of the Jungle. Too commercial, too conventional. I had nothing in common with Brendan Fraser. As far as I was concerned, he was an inauthentic cipher who simply played the parts he was told to play. I guess I did have something in common with Brendan Fraser. I didn't like Brendan Fraser, and I didn't like myself either. I told the kids, "No, sorry," and I walked away thinking, I don't want to be mistaken for Brendan Fraser. I don't want to be a Hollywood leading man. I don't even want to be a man. That's when I decided I'm going to need a new plan that involves me being seen before I die. But how? My first idea was that I would invite friends out for lunch. And when I told them about this gender confusion I was experiencing, they would have to accept me because I had just bought them lunch. I couldn't get the words out of my mouth. Throughout these years, I was dating some wonderful women who told me they loved me, but I felt like I was lying to them, and it was easier to end those relationships than to tell them the truth. The irony, of course, is that I'm living this struggle in San Francisco. Have you been to San Francisco? Finally, before my 30th birthday, I'm fed up, and I say, the next woman who is willing to spend any time with me at all, I'm telling her right away, it's better to be rejected sooner rather than later. Sure enough, I meet a wonderful woman. She's smart and talented and delightfully goofy. And so I tell her on our second date. I didn't tell her on our first date. I'm not a monster. What I told her was a mess of feelings about sex and clothing, and it was all over the place. But she saw me, and she still wanted me in her life. So I married her. That was just the start. I got myself into therapy, and it would be 8 years before I wore what I wanted to wear in the light of day. I try not to think about all the dresses I could have bought with 8 years of therapy money. There were a lot of people to tell, but life got messy. We moved countries twice, and we had kids. I worried for years about telling the boys. Finally, when they were 9 and 12, I sat them down and I said, I think it's amazing that you're growing up in this world where you can be what you want to be and not feel ashamed. That's not the world I grew up in. I felt a lot of shame for who I was, and I don't want you boys to ever feel shame. And so I want to tell you now that I identify as gender fluid and non-binary. And that I talked a little bit about what that would mean for us going forward as a family. And when I got to the end, they looked at me like I had just told them we were having leftovers for dinner. They said, "Can we eat now?" And I said, "But wait, don't you have any questions?" And they said, "Dad, is what you just told us special?" I said, "Yes, I think it is, and it's important we share these things." And they said, "Okay, but wait, if it's a special night, do we get soda with dinner?" Which I think is the exact right response. After that, it was time to tell everybody, but I wasn't doing 100 coming out conversations. I had a video online, I gave people a link, and what came back were almost entirely messages of love and support. People saw me, and they wanted me in their life. Where was I? Oh, right, Brendan Fraser. So recently he made a film called The Whale. I think we can all agree a step up from Encino Man. And in it, he plays a morbidly obese man on the verge of death. He is eating to self-medicate, and he has all but given up on the idea of ever being seen. At one point, he says to his estranged daughter, "Look at me, who would want me in their life?" And I suspect I'm not the only one in this room who knows what that feels like. But I bet very few of us will ever know what it's like to be paid $12 million to feel that way. I then read some interviews with Brendan Fraser. He talked about his struggles with mental health, the difficulty of coming out with his own story of being sexually assaulted, and the challenges of fatherhood and celebrity. So I guess I like Brendan Fraser now. I know, it doesn't sound right to me either. But if I can like Brendan Fraser, I suppose that means I can like myself too. Thank you.